So, good morning. I welcome you to this first workshop today. My name is Ulrich Schachtschneider from Germany. My English is not so excellent. I can understand English, but to speak in English, it's not so excellent. So I will change in German. If you want to understand this workshop, you must take the translator for the English-speaking people. Is this a problem everybody has? The earphones with the translation? Okay, so I changed in German. In Deutsch muss ich auch das Mikro haben. Der Workshop geht heute hier über das Thema Ökobonus beziehungsweise ökologisches Grundeinkommen, ökologisch finanziertes Grundeinkommen. Und ich begrüße hier dazu die Christiane Maringer. Sie ist Stadträtin in Purkersdorf in Österreich für die KPÖ und ist dort zuständig für Energie und hat ein Modell entwickelt, beziehungsweise die KPÖ hat ein Modell entwickelt für einen Ökobonus, für eine Stromgrundsicherung. Die Christiane wird beginnen. Dann begrüße ich Alwine Schreiber-Martens von der Initiative für Natürliche Wirtschaftsordnung. Sie wird über das ökologisch finanzierte Grundeinkommen sprechen. Ich selber, Energieberater und freier Sozialwissenschaftler, arbeite gelegentlich für die Rosa-Luxemburg-Stiftung. Unter anderem werde auch was zum Konzept ökologisch finanziertes Grundeinkommen sagen. Und dann haben wir noch den Ludwig Micheler, der ist bei der Attac AG Grundeinkommen. Wir sind 4 Sprecher, wir werden es kurz machen, maximal 10 Minuten. Ich werde auf mich selbst begrenzen. Und wir fangen an. Wir machen das am besten so, dass wir erst jetzt hier die Vorträge halten. Danach kann es kurze Verständnisfragen geben und die Diskussion machen wir danach. Ja, dann würde ich Christiane bitten, zu beginnen mit deinem Vortrag.
Guten Morgen. Danke mal für die Möglichkeit, dass ich hier unser Konzept präsentieren kann. Nur eine kleine Richtigstellung für die Kollegen und Kolleginnen aus Österreich. Stadträtin bin ich für eine Bündnisliste, aber aktiv bin ich seit vielen, vielen Jahren in der KPÖ. Und das Konzept, das ich heute präsentiere, ist auch ein Konzept, das die KPÖ entwickelt hat. Die Kommunistische Partei in Österreich. Das Erste, was ich vorausschicken möchte, weil es da in den vergangenen Tagen schon zu Missverständnissen gekommen ist, unser Konzept fällt eigentlich nicht in die Debatte um Ökobonus und Co., weil es einfach einen anderen Ansatz hat. Die KPÖ sieht es natürlich als eine Notwendigkeit an, dass der Verbrauch von fossilen Treibstoffen höher besteuert wird, erachtet es aber für wesentlich und also für unseren zentraler Punkt ist, dass solche höheren Besteuerungen, andere Berechnungssysteme mit sozialen Maßnahmen flankiert werden. Zum Beispiel, das ist eins unserer Ansätze, mit einer deutlichen Verbesserung und Verdichtung im öffentlichen Verkehr und mit einer Freifahrt im öffentlichen Verkehr. Das ist auch eins der beiden Konzepte, die wir angehen unter dem Motto Wege zu einem bedingungslosen Grundeinkommen. Was das Thema Freifahrt betrifft, haben wir jetzt einen kleinen Erfolg erringen können. Unsere Gemeinderätin in Linz, Gelinde Grün, hat einen Antrag in den Gemeinderat eingebracht, dass die Linzer Verkehrsbetriebe beauftragt werden, eine Studie über die Vorteile und Nachteile und über die Kosten und Nutzen des Freifahrts im Linzer Nahverkehr zu erstellen. Dieser Antrag ist einstimmig angenommen worden und wir dürfen also davon ausgehen, dass wir in nächster Zukunft einmal konkrete Zahlen in die Hand bekommen, was das Thema Freifahrt in einer größeren Stadt in Österreich betrifft. Jetzt zu dem Konzept der Energiegrundsicherung. Wir beschäftigen uns seit vielen Jahren mit der Frage der Einführung eines bedingungslosen Grundeinkommens und wir sind relativ schnell an dem Punkt angelangt, dass wir es für sinnvoll halten, Schritte dorthin in die Diskussion zu bringen, vor allem auch aus dem Grund, dass es ja nicht unwesentlich ist, in der Debatte um einen Gratisbezug erst einmal die Köpfe der Menschen zu erreichen. Weil nach wie vor ist es so, dass etwas gratis zu beziehen uns entweder nicht zusteht oder dann eben keinen Wert mehr hat. Und in dieser Debatte sind wir eben dann auf diese beiden Modelle, Freifahrt und Energiegrundsicherung, gekommen. Wobei beide Konzepte, und das ist uns sehr wesentlich, sowohl den ökologischen als auch den sozialen Aspekt verknüpfen und verbinden. Bei der Energiegrundsicherung geht es noch einmal vorweg gesagt darum, Haushalte mit Wärme und Licht zu versorgen und nicht jetzt kostenlos Energie für motorisierten Individualverkehr zur Verfügung zu stellen. Warum ein Gratisbezug von Energie für Haushalte? Wir stellen fest, dass
we focus on households. There is the term energy poverty, and more people are poor in energy. This plays a major role in their overall poverty. We don't have many numbers on this for Austria. Currently, in 2010, 313,000 people in Austria could not keep their apartments sufficiently heated. However, there are no numbers that tell us who really cut off electricity and heat. So we don't know in how many households energy was cut off completely. The energy companies in the current form do not want to provide numbers to us. They do not want to tell us how many households were deprived of power or heating, and this to us is unacceptable. For many years we have been observing that the households have to pay more and more for energy. I don't have to present the numbers to you because I have numbers concerning the different federal states of Austria, and they are all documented also by way of numerous conferences on poverty. Now, when we take a look at energy costs, it becomes very clear that low-income groups have not a lot of room for maneuver. They can just pay for basic supply and this will be more difficult for them if the cost of living increases. Now, this is what our concept focuses on. Basic security is essential, and if we provide energy to them, then this is essential to these people, and it is politically feasible. Now, what does the concept entail? Each household gets a certain amount of supply free of charge. 2,700 power and 800 cubic meter of gas in a 60 square meter household composed of 2 people. So this should be enough to satisfy the essential demands and to also allow for participation in society. Of course, this has to be evaluated according to the form of life, to energy demand within this household and where these people live, and then it can be adjusted. This equivalent, or the equivalent in power, if it's not only gas which is supplied, should be available to everyone living in Austria, and they should have a legal right to it. Everyone, and there should be no proof of need, and it shouldn't be differentiated according to social need. So the ones who don't need this supply free of charge, they should be subjected to a different system of taxation, for example. This way we get the money back. So, basic energy supply. Today a lot is wasted within the sector of energy, also when it comes to power and gas. Each household has to pay a high amount just for the basic fees, just for the provision of pipelines. So there is this basic fee, and then everyone has to pay the basic fee, no matter how much they consume in the end. But we want to turn this existing concept around. We want to measure the consumption of energy after people having paid the basic fee, and then measure this and then make people pay accordingly. So they get a specific amount free of charge, and there should also be saving incentives. If they don't use all of this, then they get money back. This concept is appealing due to the funding. It is funded by the system itself. So there will be reallocations within the energy sector, and you just need to pay for the additional consumption. This should be enough to cover the demand. We think it could be possible by putting a tax on the additional profits of the company, then also the prices for heating oil will rise. This could be taxated, and then there could be a different system of taxation for larger energy companies. And then, of course, we will also generate income for payments for the additional consumption. Now, reallocation. We take the prices of August 2008, and it would be as follows: 1.3 billion euro for power, 0.7 billion for gas, and then 1.4 for other energy carriers, so 3.4 billion euros. We have 343 million households in Germany, in Austria, so they get a specific amount each year for free. This is an order of magnitude. This corresponds to the budget for the Austrian army. The mineral oil companies in Austria, OMV, in 2007 was 2.4 billion euros. At the time, only 570 million euro in taxes were paid. So it would be great to have higher taxation on these companies, and also maybe specific taxes, maybe 40% for oil. This would have generated a profit of 720 million and 1 billion from other companies. So all in all, 1 billion euros. So this is just an example, but it shows you that more is possible, more than what is actually achieved. Why do we say that this can be implemented? Well, Currently, energy companies, at least in Austria, are still part of public service, and therefore they are subject to politics, and therefore it is politically feasible. 49% of all the companies are privatized today, but still the majority of all of those can determine which direction they are heading. Now, if you come up with a concept like energy basic security, then it should be reversed. It should be in public ownership, and further privatization of the energy sector is not sensible. Now, which funds were used to pay for the plants and also pipelines of today's energy companies? Because private shareholders, they generate profit from them. Now, I don't have much time left. I'll be very brief. So, where could we start? What are our starting points? We want to provide energy free of charge, and we need to talk about several parameters. So the supply of energy has to be very clear. But it's not just about a defined amount of energy. No, for us it's about providing an efficient service, namely heating or light. However, in this we need to focus on a different system of energy. The energy system needs to be non-polluting, energy-friendly. It shouldn't consume too much. Then it should be targeted at regional energy objectives. It should create jobs in the specific region. And another essential aspect, it should have small-scale structures. This way, co-determination and democratic politics is possible. Then second, it's about security of supply, risk-free. We do not want to use nuclear power plants. Oil, which is the basis for energy supply nowadays, should not be secured or safeguarded by the army. The prices for energy supply should not be subject to speculation. So, in our concept, we need resources that neither need to be mined nor exploited. Now, the energy companies, they are highly concentrated, and together with the car industry, they hinder the necessary structural change which is necessary to use energy in a cost-saving manner. So can we escape this political trap, this energy trap? So I think this was the end of my speech. To conclude, I would just like to refer you to one thing. As I said in the beginning, in the two concepts centrally focus on the ecological and the social questions. We think these two questions need to be combined, because we believe that we cannot solve one question without the other. None of these two should be neglected. Supply of energy, however, is a central component. Whenever we talk about participation in society, whether it's in education, consumption, healthcare, seeing friends, etc., in all of these we have to talk about these two questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Christiane. There are questions only for clarification, also nur Verständnisfragen zum.
Questions to clarify anything concerning this basic security.
Kannst du mir ein Mikro geben?
Okay.
I think this question just concerned the numbers. She was asking about the numbers. But I sent the concept around. It's on the website in form of a PDF, and there you find all the numbers you need.
Another question. Okay. I think we will discuss the conception later. So I will continue with my conception. Ja, die
Christiane Maringer has just presented a model for a material eco-bonus in kilowatt hours electricity and cubic meters of gas, etc. Now, my concept is more general. It's a general eco-bonus, and financing the basic income through an eco-tax. I'd like to go through this very briefly in 3 steps. First of all, I'd like to tell you why such a concept or model means redistribution, and then I'd also like to say that it's a very suitable model to work together with the ecological movement, together with the movement for basic income. And now I'd like to say why this is a good way of getting started with a basic income model. An ecological basic income. It is based on the principle of tax and share. Undesired emissions, CO2 or other emissions, or use of resources, rare earth metals, using the earth, etc. All of this will be taxed, and the income, it's very simple. The income will be redistributed in equal parts as an eco-dividend, an eco-bonus. And this would then be the ecological basic income. The result of this taxation on resources and emissions at the beginning of the production chain would be that certain products and types of consumption would become more expensive. Consumption, which is a major burden on the environment, would become more expensive, and consuming products, this would be opposed or in contrast to a sustainable development. It's not only good for our environment, it's not only emancipatory because it funds the basic income, but it's redistribution at the same time, as you can see on this chart, because high-income earners consume more of our environment on average. And the payouts would be the same, so the people with a high income would be the net payers, and those with lower income, if they are below the average, they would consume less of our environmental resources on average. They would be the net winners with this principle. Often, people criticize this approach and say it's not correct. They would say that the poor people have to use more resources and that this would be a non-social model. There are a number of results that I cannot refer to here in this short amount of time, but the results of research show that higher income earners use more environmental resources. And the results say that this is correct. Let me give you just one example. You can see a number of German cities and the GDP per person, and you can see the CO2 emissions. Berlin has a low GDP on average, 20,000 euros, has about 5 tons of CO2 emissions per individual, and Frankfurt, with a much higher average income, has 60,000 euros per year, has a much higher emission per capita. And the other cities are somewhere in between. You can see that there is a relationship between income and environmental emissions. That should suffice, I think. In this paper, in the internet, you can see additional sources. So this is the general trend. Of course, there are exceptions, where people with low income also consume more, but we have to think about these exceptions, of course, but this is the general trend. Now, the whole idea is not new. Thomas Spence, and this was 200 years ago, came up with the idea of paying 2/3 of the ground or property rent to everyone, young and old, as he said. And Peter Barnes then developed his model, which he called Sky Trust. And that means that this would be a trust in the sky, which would issue licenses for making use of the atmosphere for CO2 emissions, and the income would go to everyone. That's the same concept, redistribution. Then there was the Greens Party in Germany, the working group called Eco-Bonus, which I'm a member of. And this, as far as I know, is maybe somebody from the Green Party. It's not his working group, it's the Eco-Bonus working group of the Green Party. Maybe somebody can tell us why it is no longer really active. With the Left Party, they have a model for basic income, and the idea is that the basic income should be financed in part, not in full, by the ecological tax. Then there was Professor Eckhard from the University of Leipzig, who came up with the idea of a global eco-bonus, so that the negotiations on the climate, which have not been progressing, can be reactivated. And there have also been some studies from economic research groups, and they've taken a look and compared different types of eco-taxes, and they say that if the income is redistributed, then you won't have this regressive effect that the lower income groups would be paying more, but with the eco-tax you would have redistribution at the same time. So these academic studies come up with the same results. And then we have the Consumer Protection Agency in the state of North Rhine-Westphalia to come up with a basic progressive tariff, and that's basically what Christiane Maringer was presenting. But it's also the principle of an eco-bonus. And then in Switzerland we have what they call the steering levy. And that's basically the same principle. In other words, oil is consumed and taxed, and the dividend is 80 Swiss francs per capita. It's not very much, but at least the principle has been introduced there. Now, the whole idea of an ecological basic income, and this is something we know that there is an ecological crisis, and we're not really making much progress. With an eco-tax, we are not making much progress. We know that if you damage the environment, you should be taxed higher, but if it's not redistributed, it's not socially fair. But the appeals to change their lifestyles, this is something that only small groups are listening to, the avant-gardist groups, the people who say that using less is good. But an ecological basic income will attack this stagnation in two ways. First of all, the change in relative prices. The undesired technologies will become more expensive. So that's the technical approach to sustainability. This will give us an ecological change. New technologies will be more environmental and they should become more attractive. The ecological modernization, we have to consume differently. This is what is being pushed by this ecological basic income. And secondly, there's a non-technical approach towards sustainability, because if you have to pay higher prices for environmentally damaging consumption, is something that should be stopped. In other words, there would be less consumption. So the growth critical reply to this, the décroissance, to have a lifestyle that is not based on consumption. This will also be promoted by the ecological basic income. Now, what is the relationship between these two major approaches in environmental policy? That's something we can't tell you yet. All we know is that both will be promoted. We need both. We need the technological and the non-technical approach of different lifestyle. This has hegemonial potential because we can go together, the movement for basic income and the environmental movement. The environmental movement is suffering from the fact that it's not really progressing. Now, the introduction of an ecological basic income will have to be done step by step, or it is possible to do so step by step. In my opinion, I believe the tax rates have to be increased slowly. You can't increase them immediately to a great extent. This won't be possible, politically speaking. And that's correct. The people have to be able to change their behavior slowly. So the tax rates will go up slowly. We'll begin with a small step, and then we will increase the tax rates slowly but surely over the course of time. What will be taxed? This will be extended. We can start with CO2, but then take rare resources, use of land, or whatever we as a society consider what's important to us and what we think should be taxed, where we want to reduce consumption. And thirdly, this can be done at all different levels. A community can begin. They can tax the use of land, for instance, and it can be paid back to each citizen living in the community. They don't have to wait for the federal politicians to take action. This can also be done nationally if you want to reduce the emissions. If you want to be a pioneer, then you can begin to tax this and pay it back to the population at large as an ecological basic income. You don't have to wait for global treaties to be signed, but the best approach, of course, would be if it is international, if it is worldwide, if we could have international treaties. But we can begin beforehand. We don't have to wait for the others. I've got two examples for you here. This is where we could begin immediately. Income from the European emission trade system. This is the third phase where more is going to be auctioned off. Up until now, it's been given away, these emissions license. We expect 10 to 20 billion euros in Germany. And if you redistribute this income, then every individual will get 125 euros per year. That will not be sufficient to live off of. It's just the beginning. Or you can take the energy tax in Germany. This could be increased so that the price would be 50% higher than it is today. I had an expert opinion on this for the Luxembourg Foundation, and then you'll have income of 80 billion euros per annum. And if you distribute this per capita, it will amount to 1,000 euros per capita per year. That's just an example. Now, my conclusion is an ecological basic income can help us to begin with a basic income. And a great advantage here is that this can be done at the same time, together with the present system of Social Security. We don't have to skip from one system to another as of a specific date. We'd have one system, do away with that Social Security system, and add a new system. System hopping means that people really don't know what's in store for them, and it's quite understanding. There would be a great deal of political obstacles to overcome. I think this can be done at the same time. It can be introduced slowly so we can really take some of the pressure off the existing Social Security system by building up a basic income system. So this would not be a Green New Deal, which is not a social policy in all respects, because the poor people would have to pay more for resources. This would be a social and libertarian Green New Deal. And the final argument is that this will allow us to become active and to turn the basic income movement into a broader movement together with the environmental movement. That concludes my presentation.
Ja, gibt es Verständnisfragen?
Any questions for clarification only right now?
There's
Okay. Yes, very interesting. So the last two estimates you made then about the 250 and the 1,000, I suppose you have a written paper in which the sources of that estimate?
Yes.
So I would very much like to have it. But just one question then about the logic that leads to the 250. And so there the idea is that the emission rights are allocated to the European Union, and some of these emission rights match the emission of carbon in Germany. The figure you get to assumes that the emission rights that are used in Germany, the cost of them is redistributed to the German population only. Wouldn't the logic be that you allocate, the whole of the European Union has a certain number of emission rights, then each of the countries uses them to various extents, but surely then the proceeds, the revenues from this tax should be distributed among all European citizens, not just among the citizens of what is probably the most polluting country member state in the European Union. And given that the right to pollute the atmosphere is given to all human beings, but also to all all European citizens similarly, so you shouldn't redistribute the proceeds only to the countries that have produced the carbon. Wouldn't that? And so my question is, the 250, does that correspond to a redistribution throughout the European Union, and this is what the Germans would receive like anyone else, or does it allocate the proceeds on a national basis depending on where the pollution or the carbon emission happened? That's mine. But I found the whole thing very interesting and very congenial.
Ja, aktuell
Well, right now, the income is distributed amongst the European nations, but later on it will be different. It's going to change. That was just an example as to how we can begin. The whole system works on a European level. The whole model works on a European level. And redistributing the income, that is. But in the years to come, it's the individual member states, on the basis of their original emission rights, that's the grandfathering principle, that they would then have the income from the auctioning off of certain amounts. Part of it will go to the EU, but most of the income will go to the member states themselves in the next few years. Any more questions for clarification? Otherwise, we should move on. So I'd like to ask Alwine to take the floor now for her presentation.
Danke.
Thank you very much. 2 years ago, around 2 years ago, I met Ulrich Schachtschneider at a conference. This conference dealt with pathways out of the current crisis. At the time, we found out that we, independently of one another, share an approach when it comes to independency of natural resources. And we've met several times, and he also invited me, and the same happened here at this conference. Independent of one another, we came up with the same ideas. We have similar proposals. This is why I will not present content-wise the same as Ulrich Schachtschneider. I would like to focus on some individual points. At the conference here, we have talked a lot about the question of growth. If economic growth really was driven by human needs only, if this was the driving force, then we wouldn't have to be concerned about growth, because human needs are satisfied at some point in time. However, we are faced with a global economic crisis, and this is why it's absolutely necessary to satisfy human needs all in a way that implies gentle use of natural resources, so that we can safeguard and preserve natural resources but still offer a livelihood to people. It is very clear to me that the industrial states need to restrict their use of natural resources. So I'm talking about gentle use of natural resources. How can we achieve this objective? There are two fundamental mechanisms for it. First of all, allocation, and then second, the market mechanism. Mechanism of the market. It relies on an increase in prices of the natural resources. This is what is meant when we talk about eco-tax, for example. Eco-tax on consumption of energy, consumption of land, on consumption of rare material, biological or non-biological. So that means the use of these resources is more expensive. On the other hand, we also need to focus on the land reform 200 years ago, we heard about such a reform for the first time. It is absolutely necessary to have an equal payoff per capita, because the income due to the increased price can be paid off to everyone. There is an analytical reason for it. If this payoff doesn't happen, then the low-income groups specifically will be excluded. They will no longer be able to use the necessary basics that they need for living. So we know this, and this is why it's very clear that we will not be able to make these measures politically feasible. We need to compensate the payers for it. In 1995, a book was published on the ecological tax reform. A study was conducted by Greenpeace, commissioned by Greenpeace, and in this study it was found out that the, in my words, taxation of the use of natural resources is an effective measure. Unfortunately, at the time, just part of the income was supposed to be paid out to the consumers. Part of it was supposed to be used to reduce non-wage labor costs for the workers. I would like to underline the following. It's very important to pay out everything to the end consumers, because each company will get income by increased prices. So this increased price is paid by the end consumer. The end consumer pays for everything. Now, if you believe that if you reduce the cost for labor, if this creates jobs, well, then you fell into the trap of neoliberal thinking. If some factors of the production become more expensive, which is supplied to us by nature, then the human labor, human work gets less expensive, gets cheaper. So there is a relative decrease in price, and of course this then leads to more demand on the labor market. There will be more jobs. Companies then employ more staff, and they of course want to safeguard sales. And there, again, we have this regular payoff to the consumer again, per capita, because you paid out then more to low-income groups. If you are in a low-income group, then this payoff is, relatively speaking, more relevant to you. So this is what this is why companies could be motivated to create more jobs and not to reduce non-wage labor costs. So I would like to underline again that income due to increased prices for natural resources should be paid out per capita. And to me, it's very clear that this could also contribute to the funding of unconditional basic income. What the amount of this contribution is cannot be expressed in numbers currently. We in the industrialized states need to reduce our use of natural resources to 1/10. There is the carbon footprint. We hear about this term quite often. our carbon footprint, ecological footprint, if this was applied to everyone in the world, then we would actually need 10 planets, 10 times the Earth. So this shows us how dramatic the situation is. Ulrich mentioned it. We cannot just increase taxes once. No, it has to be done gradually. And as we heard, this has an impact on the consumption and on the production. Production needs to be redesigned. Companies who do that faster, they have a competitive advantage on the market. And then production becomes more repair-friendly. It will be a recycling economy, and this recycling economy will be profitable within a very short period of time. So these are very economic arguments, very cold in a way. I read a lot about the tax reform, and we need price incentives, price signals. The companies need them. And the final consumer also need these price incentives. People are very cautious when it comes to their wallet. So I think the increase in price and then the payout per capita, these two aspects offer incentives to the consumers. Offers incentives to something from a moral point of view, is already clear. We need to change our way of life, our lifestyle. And the financial incentives can motivate people to do that. So the use of natural resources can be controlled by increased taxes, and one objective can then not be achieved. Then we talked about auctioning the emission rights, and we need to make it very clear that we need to be the net contributors for other parts of the world, because we emit more CO2 than the average. Our ecological footprint is far too large. We can be thankful for the others to take our money, but the statement that the one who emits more pays to the ones that emit less, this offers a great opportunity. The ones who don't emit that much, that are below average on a global scale, they also have a smaller ecological footprint, of course, and those groups can then stay on their industrial path. They will not choose the same destructive pathway that we have chosen. So it's in our interest to be net contributors. This way we can offer an incentive to others, an incentive to them not to emit more than average or use natural resources excessively. Okay, time is up. All right. 1 minute left. One more remark. I know this thought comes from the reform of the use of land and development of land. It's about the reform of use of land and development of land, and they share the same characteristics. Human work cannot reproduce them, and this is why they shouldn't be left to the market. Pensions are generated if demand increases, and we need to draw and tax these pensions, and this is why increase in price and then payoff to everyone is an option. Thank you. Well, any questions, anything that needs to be clarified? I assume not. So we will hear the next speaker right away, and then we'll have time for our discussion.
My name is Ludwig Micheler, and I am not only in favor of the unconditional basic income. That's some of the most important things I do. I am also a member of Greenpeace in the city of Gießen. I'm active there in the local group. And we also have a global problem with our resources and the restrictions in our planet. And this is also important for the basic income movement. We have to understand that it's more than just redistribution that we need. We also want to save our planet. What good will a planet do if we destroy it? And that is certainly not much fun to live on a planet that's been destroyed. So how can we use the force of the two movements and combine them? We need your help. This is something that we're asking you to help us with. We can manage this together with the environmental movement. We also want to have our movement mentioned at the climate conferences or also at national conferences organized by environmental organizations. We should also make our idea known. As Ulrich Schachtschneider said very nicely, this would be unconditional basic income that can be begun with energy taxes or eco-taxes, and this is something that should be made known to the environmental movement. It might be easy to understand one thing. We have a deposit on tin cans in Germany, and it works. And this makes the whole principle clear. If you do not behave in an environmental way, you have to pay, and you pay the others who correct these mistakes. One thing I don't like is that the deposit should be even higher so that it will be done in a fairer way. Right now, this is an informal job, and this is something that would, of course, need to be taxed or corrected. Sorry. I just spilled my water. Sorry about that. CO2 molecules, we can't put a deposit on them. The deposit situation is a good model for a thinking process, so to speak, but taxes would be a better solution. You can't put a deposit on CO2 molecules. They're too small. Other resources, for example, you can't put a deposit on land, for instance. With an eco-bonus, this, as Ulrich Schachtschneider said, can be introduced immediately at the municipal level if a government coalition, for example, if the municipality is courageous enough to increase property taxes and then redistribute this money. This is the principle of basic income, and it would show that it can indeed work. And this is similar to the project in Namibia, which I also support. Now, if we introduce an eco-bonus in one country, this could be used to fight slums or all of the huge populations in large cities. It's sort of like a general basic income. The same amount would be paid out to the people who live in rural areas as paid out to those in the cities. So then it would be an incentive to live in areas that are less well off. And one more aspect, when we discuss the financial crisis, we in the movement for basic income, if we have a high energy or eco tax, then the financial capital, there's a lot of capital, it's more than what you have in the real economy, that this money would then be recycled, because high taxes mean that the government would have higher incomes. And if this is redistributed per capita, then there would be new purchasing power. So this would then be redistributed. I have to speed up here, and just for your information, my text is available as a PDF file, and this can be found on the website under Workshop 55. I'm not a very good speaker, but my text is good. And then to conclude on the workshop we had yesterday on the World Climate Treaty, I tried to speak on this point, and at the end of that there's a link to the World Climate Treaty, and the text is also available in English. So this is a draft for a world or international climate treaty by the people. It includes the eco-bonus, and our ideas are also included as well. So, one more important thing. There weren't very many English-speaking people in the audience yesterday, so let's try to take this World Climate Treaty and present it to our governments. That means that this whole idea of an unconditional basic income should be presented to the governments via the World Climate Treaty, and maybe we will arrive at the United Nations level. So we can then show that high eco-taxes will anticipate the high costs. That's an important point as well, because there will be climate damage or acidification of the oceans or radioactive waste. This will be around forever. This will be our heritage. Nuclear power, these are not charged at all of their cost, but the eco-tax will also correct that. It's also the national economy that will determine these costs. These are costs that have to be included in the prices for products such as electricity. Now, people say, if they're opposed to the eco-bonus, they say that with more and more success, the tax income will then go down. That's not a problem for the eco-bonus. Right now, there are so many problems that need to be solved in our planet. And if we take democratic decisions and we have new eco-balancing taxes, then of course there will be income, government income, which can then be redistributed in the form of a basic income. One more thing I wanted to mention is I called it the Environmental Action Transfer Income, another word for eco-tax. And this means that if you pay high taxes, then you're activated, you're motivated, and the balancing will be achieved in order to change one's ways. No, in English it says eat. I means for all, income for all. I stands for income. EAT means ecological action transfer income for all. So it's kind of a paradox here, but if you pay a high tax on gas, then there would be more money for everyone, because only the upper class would really be the ones to pay this tax. So the eco-bonus, this can really be something that can make us all happy. The eco-bonus is not something that can do anything. It's not an all-around solution. We need a central instrument to change the system. We need an eco social market economy, depending on each individual's participation. So we should dare to take the step to assume ecological responsibility. We are not too little for big. Big being the basic income grant. Thank you very much for your attention.
So we can start the debate. Yes. Am besten, Sie kommen hier vorne.
Why don't you come up front, then it won't take us long to get the mic. Maybe you can give the speaker the microphone. Thank you very much for those presentations. They were very good, and this showed me how important this combination is, to combine ecological and social measures. My name is Wolfgang Stenkan-Kürm. I'm a member of Parliament in the Green Party. We discussed this intensely some time ago, and a preliminary remark, if I may. And I think that this has not been successful so far, and why it has it's been forgotten, but we'll come back to it. I'll come back to that in just a minute. Now, this whole idea is not so exciting because it's a beginning for basic income, but it's important for ecological reasons. Basic income, getting that going will be rather weak, and the social and political component here is rather moderate. Our social politicians were not all that enthusiastic when it came to this idea, at least those who were skeptical when it comes to basic income. Those in favor of basic income understand this immediately. And if those are skeptical towards basic income, then they had a lot of questions. And if you look at the numbers that we've seen for ecological basic income, it won't be all that much in terms of social policy. We won't be able to take people out of poverty. So that is one problem. But a much more important point, in my opinion, and this is for the basic income component, and that is the ecological aspect. We have to reduce our use of resources so that we can keep our planet going. And one important key to this is energy efficiency. And if you talk about energy or resource efficiency, then if this is increased, then we have what we call the rebound effect. I'm not going to go into that now, but the panel speakers are nodding and they're familiar with that. So the problem is, if you become more efficient, then consumption goes up. And there are only two solutions in economic terms: caps, limits, in other words, or increase the prices. If the prices remain the same, then the consumption of energy will go up. That's a huge problem. That's why we have to get started. And I think the eco-bonus here is a very strong instrument. Either you have caps and distribute the emission rights, or you increase the prices, or you do both. Then we have the eco-bonus on top, which makes all of this possible. Because if resources are more expensive, that's a problem. Everyone will say, no, don't do that. It is a real burden for the population. But if you redistribute the income with an eco-bonus, then you would have a possibility to raise the prices. So the target is not the basic income and increasing the prices. On the contrary, the target is to make resources more expensive, and the means is the eco-bonus. Maybe we need to discuss this more intensely and sell it better in the Green Party. There was an objection, and that was something that was also... We saw that there was almost a majority against it at our convention. We get the income from the increase in prices, and if we distribute this to everyone, then it won't be all that much. Wouldn't it make more sense? No, it's not so much when you just get started, but wouldn't it make more sense to focus on the poor people? And then, in order to increase their basic income or to fund the means testing or things such as negative income taxes. But that's where we got stuck, so to speak. We didn't make any further progress. And in recent months, there's a new discussion now. And there are, of course, people, we have someone in the Finance Committee who's in favor of or in charge of the tax reform, and she's also in favor of the basic income, and she's making progress there. I don't know to what extent this will proceed, but a question that I have for the panel is, have you thought about a possibility whereby the income would be focused on the lower income groups, so it would be a type of negative income tax? I'm not sure if that will get us where we want to be, but it could very well be, because if it's distributed to everyone, then it won't be all that much. But if you focus on the lower income groups, then it would be a relatively large amount of money. Have you been thinking about that, or is this something that makes no sense? Or is this something that has to be distributed per capita, and is that the only solution? Thank you very much.
First we continue with the other question. You? Yes.
Danke, mein Name ist Anna.
Thank you very much. Anna Alex from Berlin. My question is, has anyone of you dealt with the concept of regulation of mass? It's about to regulate the consumption of fossil energy carriers. This is what was discussed in the middle of the 90s. And then the question is, we have an eco-tax in Germany, and the bulk consumers don't have to pay it. They are not financially involved. Couldn't that be a way to increase income? Because I remember from the parliament at the time that the eco-tax just went into the pension system, and now if the bulk consumers are involved, then this could be a possibility to have a minimum basic income, maybe also for the pensions of old age, maybe for those who are in need when they are older. Now, one comment on this remark. Maybe other countries, when they have a low ecological footprint, maybe this would be unsolidaric. This does not show solidarity to those countries that cannot afford to be connected to the power grid. I don't want to live in such a world. And we also discussed the following in the other forums. What about our way of life? Yes, I totally agree. Why do we need 2 or 3 employments? Why do we need a second home just because we work in different cities? And what is the car traffic for? Why does it have to be extended all the time? This is because it consumes more and more energy. So I think in total there will be a mix of possibilities to find a way out of energy poverty. Ulrich Schachtschneider did not propose the following. What about social tariffs for Germany? What is your favorite concept in this respect? I think the left party in Germany proposed a way to arrive at the social tariff, and then there is the Association of Energy Consumers. I collaborate with them. We are also working on a concept of a social tariff, so maybe in the future the high amount of households in need could be supplied with energy again, because we're talking about 6,000 households in Germany, and they are cut off. So this high amount of households remains cut off. Okay, 2 more questions, and I would like to ask you to be very brief. Then we'll answer the first round of questions, and then we'll have a second round. Thank you. Thank you very much. I would like to briefly say that I like the concepts that you presented. However, it is essential to see that to provide participation in society and a basic income, that these concepts are not enough. This is what we should always focus on: participation in society and the basic income, social welfare. And of course, the more subsidiaries we have, the better. Then we can reduce other parts, and if we don't have to pay for certain goods any longer, I'm thinking about the free ride or free supply of energy, well then basic income can also be reduced, the amount of basic income. However, it always has to be secured that I can participate in society and that I have a subsistence of my livelihood.
At first sight, there is a tension between what we heard from the last three speakers and what Christiane said. Because the last three speakers said, make people pay more for energy, and what Christiane said is give part of the energy to every household free of charge. So the question then to the other three speakers is, do you see that as a real tension, or would you be satisfied with the answer that the first little bit of energy can be given as a basic income in kind to everyone, free of charge? Of course, there will be no incentive to save on that first layer, but it won't matter, because if everyone anyway consumes quite a bit above that layer, what matters is the marginal price, not the average price, so the price which you pay on each additional kilowatt or each additional unit of energy. And so you can combine the free basic income in kind as free energy for each household, if it's not too complicated to administer in the light of the composition of the households and so on. And then you can still increase considerably the price on each unit of energy above that level and use the proceeds, of course, which would be less than if you taxed from, if you made people pay from the first kilowatt, but use the proceeds, use the revenues in order to fund a basic income. So my question is, there is at first sight a tension. How do you solve it?
Okay. Kurz Podiumsrunde.
Yes, we'll briefly answer your questions. Who would like to start? Please be very brief in your answers. Just 1 minute max. Well, I can identify two fields which are very important to me. Right now, we are living in times of crisis. The climate crisis, it's not that much discussed anymore in the public domain. Then economic crisis, bank crisis, financial crisis. However, all of these crises have a drastic impact on day-to-day lives. There is a social minimum that we have available, and this further decreases, not only in southern countries, also here in Europe. This is why we cannot just pick out one crisis and then try to change anything about it. No, we need to consider all of the different crises. So the free ride or free supply of a certain amount of energy, I think these concepts can fulfill social needs in a form which is tangible for people. They won't only feel the effects once the tax system has more money. But still, these concepts remain concepts. They start to change the system right away, a system which led to all of these crises. And this is the appealing thing about the free supply of energy. It's a pity that we don't have enough time to discuss it in more detail, because I think this could be a European approach. In this approach, we could work together to make things progress ecologically and also socially, to change ecological and social concepts. Thank you.
I would like to reply to Wolfgang Stremann-Kuhl. I believe, or with regard to the question as to whether we should focus on the poor, my answer is no, because we have to include everyone. We have to make our principle of an unconditional basic income, the same amount for everybody. That can only become clear if we use this eco-bonus model. It will have to be paid out to the millionaires as well, but they pay much higher taxes. They should also get the feeling that they belong to this community of people. They will get exactly the same amount in terms of the eco-bonus, the same amount as the poor people get. It doesn't suffice, of course. This ecological basic income, of course, that in countries like Namibia, however, where you have about 120 euros per year, that's what we're talking about. And there, if the rich north transfers to the poor south. So if Europe or the United States and the rich countries were to take part of their tax incomes and pass it on, that's why I'm in favor of an international climate treaty so that we can have this transfer. I would like to comment in general terms when it comes to use. I believe that payouts for something which gives us more freedom, that is sort of like a material benefit. The monetary payout will allow an individual to save even more, even when it comes to energy consumption. This incentive will no longer be there if, as you said, if you consume less, then of course it will be paid back. But as a matter of principle, I am in favor of the payout and not a distribution of material goods. Mr. Strengmann-Kuhn, I also believe that the same amount should be paid out to everyone, because this will be much less bureaucratic and because the right to use our natural resources is the same for every individual. And then very briefly here, reducing the ecological footprint. That does not mean that people don't have to do without electricity. Certainly not. Economic development should satisfy our needs. And if growth is necessary, then there should be economic growth, but only when we conserve our resources. Regulating the amounts. Well, this will only succeed if things become expensive on a long-term basis. We can't just have a eco-tax rate, and we'll have to make it clear that it's going to keep going up for various resources. And these amounts will be agreed upon, and we will consider this as the amount if this cap has been reached. And when it comes to auctions, of course, the target in terms of amounts can be reached much more easily, but I don't want to go into that. We have to begin with increasing the prices at the beginning of the production chain, especially in public transport. This will go down in price. There are a lot of models on the production side, and we really cannot give you a forecast on all of this, but the increase in prices, that is what's going to send out the message. That's what's important. Wolfgang Strengmann-Kuhn's idea to think about negative income tax and to focus more on the lower income groups, I hadn't thought about that. It's an interesting thought. It's something we should consider maybe. And there was also a proposal to make industry pay more in the eco-tax. We could begin there. That can be done. But what will happen if they pay more? Then, of course, they just won't accept it, and this means that the products that cause a lot of environmental pollution will become more expensive. Then we have a social problem. So if just trying to pass this on to the industry will not solve our basic problems. Consumption has to be more expensive for ecological regions, but it has to be redistributed. Social fees, well, that's a different principle. This principle of an eco-bonus. Now here, these would only deal for a certain period or group of people. If you earn 800 euros, you get it, but if you earn 801 euros, then you don't get that amount. And that's hard to get that point across. I certainly don't want to talk about any of the bureaucracy or administrative difficulties that might be involved, and people might be ashamed of taking on such payments. This would be an arbitrary limit, and that is a problem. It would be applied to some and not to others. Subsistence, well, that is a target, but we won't get that overnight. And this can be done gradually, and this can be combined with other funding possibilities. And finally, what about the whole idea of the material eco-bonus? For electricity, for instance, well, it's basically the same thing. Am I going to give the people 500 kilowatt hours, or am I going to give them the money? The value of the kilowatt hours, what has to be paid due to the increase in electricity? Any kilowatt hours that I use beyond the amount that is set has to be paid for. I think that this is something that can be considered to get started, but the calculations are all very difficult. And as you said, it depends on the type of energy. You have to consider the amount, depending on the number of people. How do I want to control the number of people? I do see some problems there. Apart from that, it might be something that is possible. Something is becoming more expensive, but everyone will get a certain amount. I think that's a good idea. I think one more round of questions. Ludwig, you can have the floor in just a minute. Just one sentence on that then, please. It's on, yes. This becomes very clear in France, where the Hollande government is trying to make the eco-tax system a law. And it's a similar concept as Christiane's, but it's much more complicated. And we want to avoid red tape whenever possible. So it would be easy. We want it to be easy to pay out the eco-bonus.
One last round of questions, but of course it was very difficult to finish on time because we are 4 speakers here. So please, very briefly. Renate Dorfner is the name, from Burghausen. Just a few remarks. My twin sister works for a youth authority. They take care of young people, and the authorities have to do more and more administrative work for receipts, for example, methods of calculation, anything, inventory, anything. So to use taxes which are generated or compiled because consumption is different, and you can determine this by way of calculations, and then to pay them back right away with maybe 1 month of delay, the same amount, and no preconditions have to be fulfilled, and they can be paid back to anyone in the world. This would create justice. If I make a note in my tax declaration. I tell them how much I earned last year, and then I have to wait for them to pay me back. But in the meantime, I don't know what to live off. Well, we need to talk about the time component, and this would be great. It would be great to improve the life of people very quickly. Thank you. I just wanted to talk about the dividend or the material goods. One remark on this. Of course, I'm in favor of the dividend, otherwise I wouldn't be in favor of the basic income, and I also support freedom. At the same time, I still think it's not enough. Material goods in that case refer to participation in society. So what do I do then in the end with that money? I can buy something on the electricity market, but this is not my utopia. It's about regional energy suppliers. It's also about empowerment. Something is being produced, it's fed into the system, part of it belongs to us, and it empowers us. This is the concept of with voice. So we have co-determination. We can have our say in a democracy, and then we can say which type of energy is being used. And the minimum amount which is fed back, well, I still think this portion really belongs to me. Any further remarks or questions? Yes. One more, and I think that's it. Okay, one last question. Arndt Klingenberg is the name. I see one problem in all of these solutions. These are all national solutions, but we export aluminium, and this is pure energy. No one pays taxes for it. So how can we justify this? Because you don't pay any tariff for it. There's no custom attached to it, also to lithium. It's a problem. How do we explain it? It's not a pure energy carrier, but it's bound into other materials. Elizabeth Brack. Now a general question, unconditional basic income. So you are showing us how this could be financed, but these pathways or corridors, as I call it, they are not unconditional. Money creates incentives, just like in economy. People are forced to save, and they are not just convinced by it like that. No, they have to be informed about it. We need to rethink. We need to inform them about the values. And this is what it's always about when we talk about ecological footprint, etc. We need to inform people, but you can't force people to do it just because they get a financial incentive. So I'm a bit disappointed. You always said unconditional basic income, and we said yes. Maybe one condition could be that people have to work a certain amount of hours. But it was met with a lot of opposition in 2005. So you are presenting these corridors to us. However, people are subjected to pressure, or they are convinced. Maybe it's for a good purpose, I don't know. And now I'm hearing higher prices for gasoline. Well, this cannot be implemented. The labor market is flexible. This is why I need mobility. I need to be flexible, and I cannot use an electronic car because I couldn't use it every day and for a certain amount of hours. So we said yesterday that basic income should lead to more freedom. Is that my freedom, or am I subjected to freedom which comes from the outside?
Christiane? If I use less than the allowance in energy, would I be repaid for it? Okay, but then it all boils down to the same thing, isn't it? Then we're all together. But are you really sure that is that the thing, that if I use less as from Purkersdorf, glaube ich, if I live there and I use nothing at all, I can just go and cash in?
Yes, but you can't use any energy.
Well, okay, no, that's all right. But if you use half or 3/4 or whatever. But, well, the point I was going to make, but you've already answered it, I think it's even unconstitutional because you would go against the requirement for a level playing field in economics. I mean, if I economize and I'm poor, I should be repaid the same amount as somebody who's rich. And if he economizes, I mean, he shouldn't have a benefit over me. So the level playing field argument requires that you should repay people who use less than what's given by the municipality. So I think we're all together, really.
So, vielen Dank. Wir machen jetzt ganz kurze Antworten darauf. Nochmal. Ludwig, wolltest du anfangen?
Did you want to begin, Ludwig? Only if you want to. We don't have to take the floor if you don't want to. Maybe you want to have a cup of coffee instead. No? Christiane, did you want to say something? No. No? Christiane, did you want to reply? Well, I'm not sure if I understood him correctly, but our concept is such that there would be a certain base amount that would be energy free of charge. If you're below this basic amount, if your consumption is less, then you would get some money back. Or you could get a voucher or whatever. It still has to be worked out, or we'd have to take a closer look at that. Now, if that is what you're getting at, we have already received some input to the effect that in some households that really need money, the poor households, this could mean that they won't heat or they won't turn the lights on, and that means that the children don't have what they need to be part of our society. We'd have to look at that, I think. Maybe we could say that there's a certain amount which you cannot fall below. But that's what we have in mind, yes. Also, in order to increase the ecological benefits. I think this is something that you can discuss together after the event. Now, on this one area, there have been a lot of comments and approaches, money or materials or in-kind, the unconditional basic income. This doesn't mean that we're not in favor of basic income. We are. For me, what I see is that there are a lot of people who just don't even listen anymore when they hear the term basic income. So these might be a possibility to help people to rethink, to get our foot in the door for people who think that this is not, they don't believe that we should get anything free of charge. So this is a small point where it might be possible for people to understand the whole model. We will continue to fight for basic income. Well, when it comes to the international aspects, yes, that's clear. That is a problem. We need to work hard on that, but it is a problem that can be solved. Now, in addition to the increase in prices, we also have to reduce subsidies. Then we would have lots of money, but this would go beyond the scope of this event. And I agree 100%. We need to have a change in attitudes. And I think that prices can also move us in the same direction. And when it comes to gas, we have to remember that when we talk about big oil, we already have an extension of what is the maximum. The prices for these sources of energy will go up in the future as well. So it would be good if the national economy would continuously increase the prices at various areas in order to arrive at more energy efficiency and to look for other solutions. Public transport, for instance, these are all measures which will help us to push things forward, and enlightenment and to change people's awareness. It's not only individuals, but we also have to have the effect of prices and the message they send off. One more question I'd like to react to. Isn't this a new constraint? If we say we're going to increase the prices for resources, isn't this something that will restrict my freedom? Doesn't this go against my idea of having more freedom? Well, freedom is not unlimited. I can't consume and consume and consume on our planet Earth. We must not allow our footprint to get any larger. We must have restrictions. The size of the footprint has to be limited. But where am I going to put my foot? How am I going to conduct my life? What will be my lifestyle? What resources will I consume? That's the freedom I have. But the total amount needs to be restricted. That's a question of global justice. Of course, you can say this has to come from within. But why does that always have to be a contradiction? Ethics and ecology. Why do I have to have disadvantage if I try to consume in an ethical way? If I go to an organic food store, for instance, we have to be consistent in combining ethics and ecology. I think that's a good way of doing so. Fine. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank you all for coming on a Sunday morning. I think it was quite exciting. There were some controversial points of view, and I think that this is something that we'll be dealing with for some time to come. In other words, can we finance basic income through an eco-tax? I hope you enjoy what's left of the conference. Thank you.